The global trade war could collapse the U.S. economy. The trade war, it's no longer just a spat, it's becoming a global economic earthquake. Washington and Beijing are moving their pieces, and the stakes? They're about survival. President Trump is still calling this a victory. He's strutting through the smoke and rubble of collapsing trade talks, claiming that leaders from around the world are rushing to his side. His vision is blunt. Other nations must deindustrialize, strip down their economies, hand over their factories and rebuild them in America. He calls it justice. Others call it economic warfare. But what's really happening? A lot more than the mainstream headlines suggest. The latest developments have pulled back the curtain, revealing what the United States now defines as cheating in global trade. It's not just surprising, it's shocking. Trump has released 8 new criteria for what he labels as unfair trade practices, and these go far beyond simple tariffs. They strike at the heart of global commerce, from currency manipulation to government subsidies, from dumping products below cost to even transshipping, a tactic where goods are rerouted through third countries to avoid tariffs. This is the clearest confirmation yet of what we've been saying all along. The real goal of this trade war isn't balance, it's exclusion. The U.S. wants to sever trade ties with China and force others to follow, those who don't risk being locked out of the American market. The fantasy of 90 deals in 90 days is cracking. Even America's closest allies are starting to push back. Japan, long seen as a loyal partner, is drawing the line. Despite being heavily dependent on U.S. consumers, Tokyo has realized that Trump's deals are hollow. Japan has refused to eliminate agricultural tariffs, protecting their farmers from cheap American rice. They're also standing firm on consumer safety, insisting U.S. cars meet their standards. Japan is refusing to pay protection money to fund American military bases on their soil. This is about dignity, sovereignty, long-term national survival. No more lining up to comply. Now let's turn our eyes to Beijing. China just issued a global ultimatum, a thunderclap warning to every country considering a deal with the U.S. The message? If you align with Washington, you will pay the price. China is unleashing both the carrot and the stick. The stick: economic retaliation, tariffs, export restrictions, pressure campaigns. The specifics are murky, but the intent is clear. You hurt us, we hurt you. But then comes the carrot partnership. China says it's willing to expand bilateral trade and coordinate against economic bullying. They offer an alternative, a non-American world order. Beijing is no longer playing defense. The days of quiet diplomacy are over. China is signaling that it's ready for confrontation, ready to weaponize its economy and influence. And here's the reality Washington refuses to face. China is not the same China from the early 2000s. Today, that would be suicide for everyone. In 2024, China is the world's largest trading partner to more than 120 countries. It exports $3.6 trillion and imports $2.6 trillion worth of goods. The U.S. demands the impossible. Washington wants the world to decouple from China, but the global economy is interwoven. Let's zoom in on Vietnam, a rising manufacturing star. They export nearly $150 billion to the U.S., making up 30% of their GDP. Most of it? Low-margin goods like shoes and apparel. If the U.S. slaps on a 46% tariff, Vietnam's economy could be obliterated. China knows this. That's why Beijing is not just threatening, it's investing. From 2016 to 2023, China funneled over $610 billion in foreign investments across the globe. Vietnam alone got $20 billion. Mexico, $13.5 billion. This is the golden carrot, a tidal wave of capital, jobs, and infrastructure for those who play ball with Beijing. The battle lines are drawn. Countries must choose, align with the US and face China's retaliation, or join China and risk Washington's wrath. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy is cracking, Treasury bonds are collapsing, yields on 10-year bonds have surged past 4.4%. And gold? It just shattered records at $3,400 an ounce. The U.S. dollar index has plunged below 100. It's flirting with new lows, signaling that the world is losing faith in the dollar as a safe haven. Borrowing costs are rising. Imports are getting pricier, and as confidence collapses, America begins to look more like an emerging market. What if China does the unthinkable? What if Beijing dumps its massive stockpile of U.S. Treasury bonds? Scott Bessant, a key U.S. financial voice, scoffs at the idea. He says China wouldn't dare. Selling treasuries, he argues, would backfire. Bessant is wrong, dangerously wrong. Because China doesn't need to buy back yuan with their dollar proceeds. They have other weapons. In fact, China is already using their dollar reserves to issue sovereign bonds in foreign markets, like the $2 billion they floated in Saudi Arabia. These are U.S. dollar-denominated bonds. What's the game here? Beijing is building a shadow dollar system, a parallel market for U.S. dollars. They're using dollar reserves as leverage to undermine America's currency. And that's not all. China has doubled its gold reserves in just 2 years. In 2022, gold made up 3.2% of China's total reserves. Today, it's 6.5%, with holdings nearing 2,300 tons. Bessant, in a moment of candor, admitted that gold is the only asset that's truly sanction-proof. China is not repeating Russia's error. They're going for gold. Could China back the yuan with gold, create a gold-exchangeable currency to rival the dollar? It's not a fantasy anymore, it's a real possibility. The consequences for U.S. bonds and the dollar will be catastrophic. And what is Bessant's grand plan to counter this? Buybacks, as if the United States can just buy its own debt. But how? With what money? Buybacks mean printing money or issuing more bonds, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. It's the same circular logic that got us into this mess. Another round of quantitative easing, destroying the Fed's credibility. So what now? We stand at the brink. If China weaponizes its treasury holdings and more countries reject Washington's trade policies, the U.S. bond market could collapse. The dollar could fall. Economic pain would ripple beyond America's borders. Trump and the trade war hawks may still be posturing, but reality is setting in. The world is changing fast. So the question is, will other nations join America's trade crusade, or will they align with Beijing and secure their future? And perhaps even more importantly, is the U.S. economy truly bulletproof? Let me know what you think in the comments. Smash the like button, subscribe, and stay alert. This isn't just a trade war. Economic revolution.